So when Tucker Carlson says Christians are being persecuted in Ukraine, it's important to recognize the wider context. Really what he's referring to is only a single church. Currently, the Russian Orthodox Church has a branch that exists in Ukraine that goes by the name Ukrainian Orthodox Church, Moscow Patriarchate. They insist on being called Ukrainian because in their mind they are the only legitimate Orthodox Church in Ukraine, but they have ties to Russia. In 2018, the Ecumenical Patriarch, that is one of the Central Orthodox Christian leaders based in Istanbul, granted autocephaly or canonical legitimacy to another church. This church is called the Orthodox Church of Ukraine Ecumenical Patriarchate. Since this happened, the Russian Orthodox Church and its equivalent, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church Moscow Patriarchate, UOCMP for short, have anathematized all members of the other church. In Orthodox theology, there is generally only supposed to be one patriarch per area or one Orthodox church per area. So right now there are two conflicting ideas as to whether Ukraine's spiritual patronage belongs to Moscow or Constantinople. One side points towards Constantinople, saying that, Kiev was historically controlled by Constantinople prior to 1686. The other side says that Kiev has been controlled by Moscow since 1686, so they switched. And the question is whether or not there ever was an official switching of churches. Whether this is a legitimate Orthodox church of the region is a religious question that people argue about. The question is probably irrelevant to most Christians who are not Orthodox. But what I think Western countries, as well as other Christians, can agree on is that Ukrainians or any other Christians have the right to believe whatever they want, and as a matter of freedom of religion. And so the fact that these two different churches are competing for which is the right church is not really a problem in a political sense. Rather, the problem is not that the UOCMP believes that Moscow is the proper patronage of Ukraine. Rather, the problem is that they have actively aided the Russian invaders in Ukraine. There was a bishop in Uzhhorod who gave money to the Russian separatists. There are cases of espionage where they found spies hiding in these churches. And they have disseminating propaganda, not just anti-Ukrainian propaganda, but propaganda that undermines the existence of Ukraine as a state. Call to action, in other words. So when looking at this issue, I personally like what Światoslav Szewczuk of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church says on the matter. He says you shouldn't be persecuted for belonging to some church, but for crimes against our country, and here we are all equal. A church isn't just a religious structure, it's also people with constitutional rights. While there are people in Ukraine oriented towards Moscow's orthodoxy, this church will exist even if declared illegal under state law. So while I don't personally think the church should be outlawed, I do support raids and investigations on the UOCMP's church, that is the Moscow Patriarchate's churches in Ukraine. Many of these people are in fact terrorists. People should be skeptical about them for the same reason America is skeptical about radical jihadist branches of Islam in America. The reason why it's not legal is the same reason. So there have been places where it's been outlawed, I won't lie, that's what's happened in several oblasts in Ukraine. And there had been a potential ban for the church nationwide, but the reasons are. While Tucker Carlson is correct in pointing out that the UOCMP has been banned in some cases, he's completely silent on why this particular Russian church is banned. Even more important, he's silent on the religious persecution Russians have done in territories they occupy in Ukraine. While someone can question the extent of Zelensky's method, the fact of the matter is Zelensky's actions are actually being done in part to protect Christians that deviate from what Russia deems acceptable. For starters, if we're going to complain about how the UOCMP is treated by Ukrainian government, we should note that essentially every Orthodox church in Ukraine that Russia conquers, they convert to the Russian Orthodox Church. How is that any better? If it's so bad that Ukraine is outlawing the UOCMP, Then we have to talk about how Russia is outlawing the OCU EP. There's been so much violence that Russia has placed on different types of Christians within Ukraine. Sviatoslav Shevchuk, who was quoted earlier, was put on a hit list. Since occupying the East, they have killed or seized 29 clergy or religious leaders and destroyed over 400 churches in Ukraine. If someone thinks this is merely casualties of war, they should note that Russia more widely persecutes different Christian denominations outside of Ukraine with the 2016 Yerovaya laws. Ukrainian Greek Catholics or evangelicals, Jehovah's Witnesses, etc. are not legal in Russia. Don't complain about Ukraine cracking down on a church with ties to terrorism until you recognize that Russia is straight up outlawing churches as well as targeting clergy members. Now, this doesn't include all of the crimes that Russia has done in Ukraine, but if we're talking about just religion, people should take note of this. Even the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia is not legal in Russia. So, take it as you will, just making the point. Anyone who thinks Putin is defending Christian values is out of their mind bonkers. And Zelensky, like, maybe he didn't have to outlaw the Ukrainian Orthodox Church Moscow Patriarchate, but no one can tell me the Ukrainian Orthodox Church Moscow Patriarchate was innocent or that outlawing it was as bad as what Russia's doing. So take it as it is. God bless y'all.